This is Mandy Chapter 4. You ready, Gus? All right, you settled? Gotta get Gus settled. Come on. Okay. Oh, you want? Oh, he wants to see the book. Sorry, I didn't understand. All right, there you go. Can you see it now? All right. Okay. You good? All right. So, chapter 4. Sorry. The next day was bright and sunny. Mandy could hardly wait for school to be over. It was Friday, and she only had a half day of studies and all of the weekend before her. Immediately after lunch, Mandy sped to her room and put on her oldest clothes. She ran into the garden and began looking for Jake, the handyman and the gardener at the orphanage. Mandy wanted to ask his advice and possibly borrow a few tools. She found him in the potting shed at the end of the kitchen garden. He was an old man and very stooped over. He wore exactly the same clothes day in and day out. Black shiny pants, a collarless shirt with the sleeves rolled up to the elbow, and a dark blue striped waistcoat. So now we know a new character named Jake, and he works at the orphanage, and he's the gardener and the handyman. So that's somebody that fixes things around that are broken. And Mandy wants to borrow gardening tools. I wonder what she wants the gardening tools for. You see? He brought his own lunch to the orphanage in a little tin box. His lunchtime drink was always 2 bottles of root beer, and predictably, he would snooze for a while in the early afternoon, propped up against the potting shed, among the rakes and spades and brooms and buckets and pots of every shape and size. He knew just about all there was to know about nature. It was his religion, and he spent most of his life outdoors, rain or shine. When he was just finishing his lunch when Mandy found him. "Now, Mandy, don't you come bothering me. I was just going to take a snooze for a while." "Oh, Jake, I won't stay long. I just wanted to ask you a few questions." Well. "Is it very difficult to weed a garden?" Mandy asked. "Do I have to do anything special?" "Bless my soul! Whose garden are you going to weed?" "Nobody," said Mandy, "but is it very difficult?" "Well, it depends on your soil." Jake took a long drink from his root beer, and he wiped his lips with the back of his hand. "You see, if it's good and rich and soft, then really most of your weeding can be done by just pulling at the roots very gently, mind you, until they sort of ease out, and then you can shake them off and throw them away. But if the earth is packed and hard, then you'll need a small fork or a trowel, and you sort of dig it under the weeds, lift them up gently, and kind of shake the earth loose before pulling the plant out. But anyone can do it," he added. "I see," said Mandy. "Do you have a small fork I could borrow?" "I thought you weren't going to be doing any of that," said Jake, squinting up at Mandy in a teasing way. I sort of am." Mandy didn't want to tell Jake about her secret plans. It's a project," she said. "Well, I can't let you take my things," Jake began. "Okay, well, I'll return it by midnight," Mandy broke in. "I promise, Jake. Just try me this once and see if I don't. By the time you get here tomorrow, it will be back in the shed." Jake wanted his afternoon nap, and he realized that Mandy was in a very persistent mood. And persistent is like when you bug somebody and you bug them and you bug them and you bug them and you just won't stop no matter what. So that's the kind of mood Mandy is in, and Jake realizes it. So I think he's going to give in to her. Oh, and he wanted his afternoon nap too. "All right, Mandy, but you're on your honor now. I hope you can be trusted." He slowly got up and found her a small fork. It was old and had a smooth, worn handle. "Oh, Jake, thank you!" Mandy beamed with delight. "You just bring it back." He seemed rather pleased with himself. "Now, since you're borrowing that, what about a rake to smooth out the garden over when the weeds are out?" he added. Mandy could have hugged him. She was so excited. Gathering up the tools, she hurried around to the back door of the orphanage. Leaving the rake and fork on the doorstep, she burst into the big kitchen, and she found Alice the cook just sitting down at the large wooden table to eat her own belated lunch. "Alice, could I please have some bread and butter and water to take out for the afternoon?" She moved quickly behind the lady, and threw her arms around her shoulders for a hug. I'm going for a long walk, and I won't be back until dinner. Alice had her... What are you doing, Gus? Alice had her mouth full, but she pointed at the pantry. The bread's in there, and a couple of scones, too. Help yourself, and you can use one of those old ginger ale bottles for water. Mandy buttered the bread and the scones and rinsed out the bottle and filled it with fresh, cold water. You don't have any dusters you don't want, she asked. And then, seeing the surprised look on the cook's face, she added, I was thinking I might clean my room later. Alice smiled. She heaved her big frame up from the table and went to the cupboard under the sink. Will this do? And she held up a torn piece of muslin about the size of a kitchen towel. The kitchen towel is like, So Mandy's making the cook. The cook's name was Alice. I had to look back. So Alice is the cook. That's a new character that we learned about. She's the cook, and Mandy is going to her to get something to clean the cottage with. But Alice thinks that Mandy is going to clean her room. Oh, yes, Mandy says. That would be awesome. Thank you, Alice. She gathered up her food and her water and her duster and slammed out of the kitchen door. Well laden, she staggered into the orchard a few moments later. The problem now was how to get all of her things over the wall. She finally decided to tie everything up in the muslin cloth and attach that to the big rake. Then she placed it in an upright position against the wall. Finding the same foothold she had used the previous day, she scrambled to the top. Leaning down, she carefully took hold of the rake and eased it safely up beside her. Then she let it down on the other side of the wall and swung herself onto the apple tree. Within seconds, she was racing along the pathway, clutching her possessions. Her whole being was filled with anticipation and excitement of seeing the cottage once again. She burst through the trees into the clearing and stopped short. A fat rabbit disappeared into the bank by the stream. A blackbird tick-ticked and flew into the trees. She was afraid she had dreamed it all yesterday, but there it was, solid and welcoming. It was a glorious afternoon. The sun beat down and the scent of the earth mingled with grass and clover. Mandy noticed a may tree that she hadn't seen the day before. It was in full bloom. Behind the house there was a bank of rhododendrons, their fat buds due to open any day now. There was so much she wanted to do and to see. It would obviously be impossible to do all that needed to be done this afternoon. Since Jake had lent her the rake and the fork, and she had promised to return them by the evening, and since the weather was so nice, she decided to attend to the garden first. The cottage could always be cleaned on a rainy day. So she set her things down by the door and surveyed the garden. Her garden. The little path was obviously the first thing to be cleared. She decided to begin by the front doorstep. So, in this picture, this is after Mandy cleared it off, but before it was all covered with stuff, and she started at the doorstep and then she worked her way to clear it all off. Kneeling down, she pulled at the long weeds. To her delight, they came out of the ground very easily. Carefully and methodically, she worked her way toward the little gate, avoiding the patch of stinging nettles. She made a mental note to try to get a pair of gardening gloves. They would really help to protect her hands on some of the rougher jobs. She discovered pale gray flagstones beneath the weeds, so she cleared out all the grass around them and in between them. So those are the flagstones that you see. Those are the stones there. Those are called flagstones that you see in the picture. So someone put those stones there to make a path to walk on. It was a big improvement the minute the path was cleared. It gave her a real sense of what needed to be done next. The clean line of the flagstones directed her attention to a very pretty wild rose tree that was growing up and around the porch. It needed tying back. Mandy made another note to find some twine the following day. So that's where I'm going to stop for today. We're not completely done with chapter 4, but it's a really long chapter. So Mandy now made her way back to the cottage. We met two new characters. We met Jake and we met Alice. Jake is the gardener, Alice is the cook, and she borrowed things from both of them to help her do the cottage. She's going to clean the cottage on a rainy day, but today, because it's nice out, she's going to work on the garden. So there's some things that she's clearing out. So today, I want you to just write about how you would be, how would you be brave like this and do this if you were Mandy? Or would you just say, oh, I'm not going to do with the cottage? It's a lot of work, all that weeding and then all that cleaning of that cottage. So think about it. So today for your writing, you're going to write about if you think you would be brave enough to do this, or if you would want to do it, and then why or why not. That's your writing for today. And then for the read aloud writing. And the writing lesson you will have in a little while for your nonfiction writing. Have a great day, and Gus and I will see you later or tomorrow. Say bye, Gus. Mwah.